start our lecture and our discussion. It's a great pleasure for me to say that and to announce that our doctoral school in urban geopolitics is starting now. It is not so typical, traditional form as usually, as previously we have done it, but still we hope that this event would be interesting to all of you. And we are very thankful to all of you that you have joined us and for participating in this event. Just several words putting some organizational moments. This event is taking place in framework of the project, UkrGeopol project, which is funded by Norwegian Research Council. And the project is called Ukrainian Geopolitical Fault Line Series, Urban Identities, Geopolitics and Urban Policy. And if you would like to know some more about our project, you can follow our Facebook page or our website. Also, I should say that our doctoral school is dealing this time with the geopolitical fault line series, and we would have several events in framework of this doctoral school. So we are inviting you to all of these events. But first, I should say that we are recording this event today. We are recording our lecture, and we would share the links with all doctoral school participants, so you would have the opportunity to see this event one more time. Another organizational movement concerns the program of our event. Today we would have two lectures with discussion, which would follow these lectures. And the first lecture is dealing with IDPs in post-Soviet cities, the case of Georgia, and would be done by Professor Joseph Salukvadze from Tbilisi State University. And the second lecture would be after a little break, and it starts at 5 p.m. from Dr. Evgenia Kuznetsova from Kyiv School of Economics. And it will be dedicated to the IDPs and the media in geopolitical fault line cities. Also, I should announce that several other organizational movements concerning our program, and it's a great honor for us to have this surprising lecture with a surprising speaker on 2nd of October from Dr. Tatiana Zhurzenko, which would be speaking about the not even past contested urban memories of Ukraine's unresolved conflict. And finally, our doctoral school would be finished with a lecture from Dr. Vlad Mifnenko from University of Oxford, with his lecture, The Causes and Consequences of the War in Eastern Ukraine, an Economic Geography Perspective. But we would have not only lectures and not only discussions, but also the virtual excursion to the Dnipro, which should be the key city for our project and also for our doctoral school, which was planned to hold in June and July, but it was cancelled, and now we have this event in virtual space. So we would have this virtual excursion for Dnipro city, and this excursion would be moderated by Dr. Sven Daniel Wolf from University of Lausanne. So a lot of interesting events are waiting for us during these 4 days, or for days of urban geopolitics, as we have called them. So please join us during these events, and please discuss interesting issues as which we have prepared for you. Now I would like to give the floor to the principal investigator of our project, Professor Michael Gentile, for some opening speech. So Michael, please, the floor is yours.
Opening speech. The opening speech is such that I welcome you all. Thank you for being here. And now I'll pass the word over to Soso already. Soso, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure really to be together with you today. Although I regret that I'm not physically in Kiev, which would be, and you, many of you also, but it's always a pleasure to meet colleagues, friends, and also to have an opportunity to exchange some opinions, some knowledge, and some interpretations of the things with the students and with the colleagues all over the world. So thank you. Now one technical question. May I already share the screen? Does it work?
Yes, you may. Yes, you may.
So I hope that you can see the screen well and hear me also well. Okay, so the topic of today's my speech is IDPs in post-Soviet cities, the case of Georgia. However, I also, and this is the title which I didn't kind of invent, or I didn't write. It comes from the organizers. Thank you very much. In general, it is a very nice title. I agreed upon it. But also, I'm offering you also second title, which is a little bit more detailed, because I'm not going so much to talk about the other post-Soviet cities than Georgian cities, and especially Tbilisi. IDPs in the cities of Georgia, social and spatial aspects of alienation and segregation. That will be a kind of main topic, the main idea of my presentation. In the preface, I will tell you that I will try to answer the question, how does the existence of IDPs and their daily struggle for survival affect reconstruction or creation of urban or recreation of urban environment? This is the main question, but there are a lot of aspects, and I will try to touch them and give my perspective about them during my speech. Now, what I'm based on when speaking about those things, so many years ago, back in 2013, we finished a project which was called Coping with Marginality and Exclusion. Can refugees communities successfully integrate it into mainstream urban societies in Georgia? And that was funded by Academic Swiss Caucasus Network. Was quite interesting work for all of us. But you understand that over the last 7 or 8 years, a lot of things changed, and I will try, although I didn't follow up by my further research on this topic, I will try to give my opinion and my arguments, how I see the things change here in Georgia regarding IDPs and regarding their urban life. In that project, we had different methods, but the main method of research, of study, was a representative survey in 9 urban settlements of Georgia with highest concentration of IDPs, and 900 face-to-face semi-structured interviews. That was really quite a bulk of work and of information. And from theoretical and conceptual insights, I would emphasize theories of social capital, social networks, and social mobility, and concepts of persistent resilience, multiple economics, right to the city. So some of them our audience knows already. So Yeah, but I won't go today very deeply in some theoretical aspects, maybe some um, study findings and interpretation of what we found that time regarding IDPs integration in the mainstream society, and also give my, as I said, perspective from today's point of view. So I will be speaking mostly about Tbilisi for several reasons, and that will be clear after a couple of slides. Now, let's first put this or touch the global context of the problem. So displacement as such is a huge problem, and there are a lot of displaced people in the world. This is a very recent search of mine on the website of UN Refugee Agency, and it says that around 80 million people are forcibly displaced in different countries of the world. And out of them, more than half, so it is here, almost 46 million people are internally displaced people. So this is a huge problem, really, has a very, very large scale. And if we would imagine a country kind of settled by displaced people, that would be, I think, the largest in Europe, right? Or one of the largest, at least. In many, this phenomena also has a very threatening trend, because if you see here, this graph, this diagram, from 2010 or 2011 on, there was almost, there was a very, very fast growth of displaced people, almost doubled. And that is a very bad sign, you know, because this situation does not change positively. It even becomes more and more grave over time. And actually, I can't mention by this yesterday's very bad kind of news in our region of South Caucasus, when Armenia and Azerbaijan started again quite threatening military activities. So this is how displaced people emerge and multiply. And and we only have to hope that it won't have a very bad, let's say, continuation. It will calm down somehow. And the kind of hope is on the international community, of course, also, and the common sense of those two countries and the countries in the region. So this phenomenon of displacement also has a very clear geographical dimension. And bad thing is that many countries have displaced persons, but we also see that in some regions, in some parts of the world, the concentration is huge, very, very big. So here, as you see, in the area of Middle East and the South Caucasus, it is one of the highest, the concentration. You see that the circles which show the number of displaced people are overlapping each other everywhere, you know, and almost in all countries in the region, all three South Caucasian countries, and also Middle East countries like Syria, Iraq, and so on and so on. I would skip this kind of listing. This situation is quite tense. And bad thing is also that if 6 or 7 years ago, Ukraine was not a part of this map, I mean, was not actually mentioned. Now, Ukraine also has a lot of internally displaced people, and on the one hand, you are studying this phenomenon in Ukraine. On the other hand, we know that it is in reality a very, very difficult life for many people. And here I just marked the numbers which is given by internal displacement monitoring center, and this is quite fresh data, and they speak about 800,000 displaced in Ukraine. I don't know whether you accept it or not, but it is their official statistics. Is about 280, maybe a little bit too much, but definitely we have more than 250,000 IDPs in Georgia. And just a small thing also to be on the safe side, that everyone understands in the same way. This is about definition of the term of IDP. So, an internally displaced person is someone who is forced to flee his or her home, but who remains with the country's borders. So this is a difference of IDP from refugee, because sometimes these notions are mixed up. And the essence is that IDPs are staying in their own country, and the refugees, they leave to other countries. And this is the principal difference. And what is important for our speech, for my speech, and for our topic is that significant number of IDPs are living in urban areas. However, and this is also an experience in Georgia, but however, I read somewhere that was interesting that most of the humanitarian and other sort of aid is going mostly to the IDPs who live in rural places, while urban IDPs are more, let's say, ignored. And actually this means that they have to arrange, organize, improve their lives by means of their activities, which is sometimes archaic, difficult. Okay, after this general overview, let us go now down, zoom in the case of Georgia. Yeah, the area, I mean, the region of the South Caucasus is unfortunately famous for displacement and conflicts. I already mentioned yesterday's bad news, but it was systematic, I would say, from the 1990s that many ethno-political conflicts happened there, especially in Georgia. We had two of them. In Abkhazia, in so-called South Ossetia, which is part of Shida-Kartli or Inner Kartli region. So the Soviet Union and the Soviet communists kind of assured that these bombs like autonomous entities are founded and installed in Georgia, in some other countries. And then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, naturally they started to work. Now I'm not going really in details or in my interpretation what happened there, but I will. I have to say that yes, in the 1990s, early 1990s, armed ethno-political conflicts exploded in Georgia, and then in 2008, 12 years ago, we had the Russo-Georgian War, and these both kind of conflicts and wars, they generated a large number of displaced people. Up to 400,000 people were displaced. And of course, some of them, they went abroad, but more than 250,000, they stayed in Georgia, and they are belonging to the category of internally displaced persons. The majority of them, they fled from Abkhazia because South Ossetia was and is a very small region, maximum at the moment, not more than 40, 50,000 people living there, and probably 10 to 15% of this population are militaries from Russia. So it's really a small region. However, you know, for smaller number of refugees is also and internally displaced people is also very hard to leave their living places, and that's a big tragedy always. Now the story starts. Once these things happen, IDPs found new housing, not easily, or shelters, either individually by themselves, using their connections and so on and so, or in a group shelters called collective centers. And the most of our story and interpretation and analysis about the people who are living in collective centers, because these are two quite different cases of displacement. In the beginning of the 2010s, more than 110,000 IDPs lived in collective centers, and almost half of them, if I'm not wrong, from 45 to 47,000 in Tbilisi. And that number, by that time, it was more than 4% of total population of Tbilisi. So that is a substantial number. Over 500 collective centers in Tbilisi emerged by that time. Now let us talk what is this famous collective center. So actually collective centers emerged as a new form of residence in many cities of Georgia, and not only Georgia, but we are talking now mainly about Georgia, in Tbilisi and in some other bigger cities, mostly like Batumi, Kutaisi, Tsaltubo, Gori, Zugdidi, and so on. It doesn't make sense to list all of them, but yeah, they started hosting the IDP population. And collective center is a building owned by a state or by private owners, where people displaced from Abkhazia or South Ossetia settled, or they were invited to settle there. Mostly these are buildings in poor conditions, or sometimes if they are not in poor conditions, they have got deteriorated after occupation by IDPs. Because IDPs' lives are very, very kind of difficult, but at the same time very powerful to modify the things, to change the things. And we will see the examples of that. They are negatively affecting these collective centers' surroundings as well as IDP's life. And why? Collective centers usually are unstable housing for IDPs. I think that many of you know about categorizing typology of housing according to European standards. It is so-called ethos typology, and it says that unstable is housing which is lacking and is dangerous either from physical point of view for the dwellers there, or they are dangerous from because of its status, I mean legal status. So first of all, these are non-residential buildings. So they were not initially originally created for living there, and therefore they are inconvenient. Then, because of big number of IDPs approached those estates or those houses, the overcrowding happened. So many people in the smaller space. The residential quality of such buildings is of course low because they don't have basic utilities everywhere. They are not installed, and all necessary facilities for living are missing. And the legal aspect, which I already mentioned, very often it was those buildings have been illegally occupied, and there was a very, very high pressure and threat of eviction from such buildings, and that happened many times. So now let us switch to the geographical or to spatial kind of picture. I said that I am talking today only about Tbilisi because Tbilisi is very representative in this case for this topic. And you see that these clusters, which are fixed on the map, they show that, not only peripheral and not so much peripheral or remote areas have been settled by IDPs and where they occupied forcefully or not forcefully sub-residential spaces, but also central areas like here, or residential, let's say, micro-riots. And this is very interesting because then when we will be speaking about segregation, this really was an important aspect why segregation did not happen in Tbilisi. Because from the very beginning, occupation by IDPs of new living spaces did not mean that they went somewhere in the remote areas of the city. On contrary, you understand that the public housing establishments, I mean buildings, public buildings and schools and hotels and so on, which was occupied afterwards after the conflict, I mean, by the IDPs, they were very often in the central parts of the, and very, very nicely allocated parts of Tbilisi. Now, what sort of practices they applied for to organize their lives in a short time and then during the longer period, if they stayed in the initially acquired collective centers. We call it, do-it-yourself practices because nobody helped them really to reorganize, to rearrange the spaces which they occupied or acquired. As nearly none of collective centers was built as residential building, IDPs had to redesign buildings and compartments to make the space and place more or less livable. Changes involved shifting rooms, extending living space by using facilities which were meant for absolutely different means other than living. And entrances, here now on the picture you can see that entrances used as rooms, windows turned into walls, spaces below stairs as in utility rooms and so on. So everything was reutilized, redesigned, let's say, but through self-help practices only, because they didn't have any money, and also the government didn't take much care about how they were living in those spaces. Sometimes they occupied those spaces just informally or illegally, right? And now another part of it is, again, do-it-yourself practices for which Tbilisi and Georgian cities are famous, apartment building extensions. This is mostly for the refugees, IDPs, which accommodated themselves individually, but that was a way not only for them, but for the mainstream society of Georgia of Tbilisi, sorry, the residents to make some attachments in order to extend their living spaces. And this is a very peculiar feature of Tbilisi, of Georgian and also non-Georgian, some of non-Georgian cities and towns. Even we found such a case in North Macedonia. We together with Stefan Buzarowski and Michael wrote one, I think, very nice article about it. But this is what we're speaking about. So this is a kind of, again, self-help practices, do-it-yourself practices, which just changed the buildings where internally displaced people lived. They also took care of surrounding spaces in a good way, in a good manner, or better manner and worse manner, because sometimes they really organized, although again informally, and demarcated, delimited spaces and made there some sort of urban gardens, which is not the worst place, but in some cases they just deteriorated the space, and you see these things happen in quite a lot of places where internally displaced people lived. And the explanation may be that, yeah, so many of them, they did not sort of didn't feel that this is their permanent living space. And we will talk about this kind of sentiment, which is very, very important to explain the behavior of many IDPs. So also they appropriated and maintained in their way, in way they could, public and collective spaces in the buildings. Due to lack of living spaces in the majority of collective centers, they just, well, organized living rooms in entrances, in some meeting halls, and so on. But what I have shown you so far is occupation and appropriation of, let's say, ugly, boring, Soviet, let's say, public buildings. I said that sometimes those buildings have been already deteriorated before, and that was easier, of course, than to occupy. But sometimes some refugees, they succeeded and managed to penetrate, to occupy the nice hotels, some more fancy, let's say, buildings. And I have to tell you that before 2006, 2007, I think that Michael has seen it. So he came by the time when it was still like this. All hotels in Tbilisi, they were occupied by IDPs. All of them, absolutely. And here I have one very exemplary, let's say, case. So the Hotel Iberia, one of the famous hotels in the Soviet Union, that was a kind of luxury hotel for in-tourists. I went there only 3 or 4 times because I was forbidden to enter there, because that was everything on hard currency, and you couldn't go to the bar there during the Soviet time. And I don't know how many KGB people would watch you when you appeared in the kind of lobby. Okay, that was a really nice hotel, but after refugees came back, came to Tbilisi, and after the Soviet Union collapsed, It was converted into IDP Collective Center, and now you can really see if in other buildings and in other places the reshaping of the area or place making was really very small scale, local, even not seen from outside. Here it was a sort of a big advertisement for the city. Now we live like this. And that was stopped only closer to the end of 2000s. Yeah? And all those IDPs have been given compensation or given alternative space in order to leave those fancy places, and some of the buildings which have been habitated by them have been demolished or reconstructed like this one. And today this is how the place of former Iberia, now Radisson Blu Hotel, looks like. However, some people are very sentimental about not refugee occupied Iberia, but the Soviet time Iberia. They say that, okay, that Iberia was much better. And this is something, yeah, which they don't like. But these sentiments are also a part of our narrative, part of our story, because it explains many things, not only about IDPs, but about regular people, how they perceive the processes and phenomena which happened and happens now. Now let's put aside this constructional building things and talk about social aspects of existence, of emergence of IDPs in big cities, in Georgian cities and in Tbilisi. First of all, yeah, what unites them, IDPs, it is displacement, that's clear, yeah? And they are called after this. And this is a process, yeah, and the very important thing that they have been, many of them, displaced not only once, but several times. Because they would go from one place to another and they didn't like or they were stigmatized and so on and so on. For many reasons, and some motivations, motives and reasons are listed here, they had to change place several times. One, it was improvement of housing conditions. For that, they changed a new place to another place. New job opportunities in new places. And this, of course, means that they would prefer to go from smaller towns to the larger cities or from the peripheries to the central places. And eviction. Some people, they left, some refugees, they left their former, let's say, shelters because of eviction. And what consequences then came out of those processes? Frequent movement, which did not allow developing social contacts. Displacement caused frustration and hopelessness. Stigmatization of IDPs in new locations by already existing population, because you could understand that if they would change the space like they did in Iberia or some other collective centers, of course, they were not welcome at all. And problems, inability of socialization of IDPs. And here I added first generation because the things really changed over the last 10 years, and I will tell about that a little bit later. Let me see. Am I well in time? Okay, I will need most probably 15-20 more minutes. I'm a little bit too slow, but okay. Now, what were the main aspects, main factors of segregation? Education, first of all, because the education is one of the best ways to integrate in the society, not only for IDPs, but for everyone. However, the policy from the state was a little bit, you know, selfish and stupid towards, and unrealistic towards IDPs. order to feel them that they are different sort of people coming from another region, they tried and to remove some obstacles of integration of the existing population with the migrant population. They started to create I mean, special facilities for us, special schools, special kindergartens, and so on. Also employing the refugees, and that was really not a very good idea. I checked it. Okay, in the beginning, in Tbilisi, there were 50 secondary schools, especially for IDPs, only for IDPs. Then in 15 years' time, it reduced down to 13. And today, I think that there are no such schools anymore, because this is not anymore a problem or an approach to put IDPs and IDP children in different schools than other people. And that is, of course, also a work of a time, because the first generation of IDPs, they were in different circumstances, and they had different wishes and coping strategies than this generation. I mean, the second generation, which lives now. So what does it did it cause? High level of segregation, low level of education, and parents' pseudo satisfaction, because in the beginning they were very happy that the IDP children have been dealing with each other, but it was not very good for their father career, as it was then kind of shown. Another big problem is unemployment, and problem of the employment is not specific for IDPs. However, to deal with two problems simultaneously, with displacement and with unemployment, that was a really nightmare, and is up to now a nightmare for many IDPs. And unemployment rates, according to the statistics, is much higher among IDPs, at least twice as high as among the regular population of Georgia. And this is very serious, also negative factor of their integration in the society. And now, why it happened? Me and my colleagues who worked in that project, we think that while economic background of many people, of many IDPs, was agriculture, industry, and so on. They didn't find the relevant jobs in Tbilisi and in other cities, and therefore they had to do something else. And then they went, the very large number of them, the biggest majority of them, they went to informal private sector as an open air market of open air vendors, and so on. Another thing is a social networking. It's also easy to explain. So they already, I mean, IDPs already created a very dense and close network with each other, and very rare network with others. And that, unfortunately, could be qualified as a concentration of poverty, because the poor people, they kept together. And that was not a very good outcome afterwards. So I would skip here, I think, reasoning why it's clear, because of stigmatization from other population, from some of the population from outside, because of the same faith, let's say, which they experienced and so on. Sometimes they were relatives and they kept together. But then we got an overrepresentation of the people with the same background, which is feature, a trait, or criterium for segregation. A concentration of unemployed people did not and does not motivate IDPs to look for a job. And then concentration of especially men, because this is also a very specific gender phenomenon, but you have to know that, yeah, men are more passive in this, in terms of this criteria. And concentration of poverty led to very specific behavior, which was not helping their integration. Okay, these are just kind of figures which show, which compares bonding and bridging capital. I think you know about it. Bonding is when the contacts in the community are only inside, and the bridging is when it's outside and the communities are integrated with each other. Of course, IDPs, they have predominantly bonding capital, but not bridging capital. And then the political participation. This is very important thing and political reason, and the policies towards IDPs. Since they left their homes, their political participation was very, very little. In the 1990s, 2000s, three responsible institutions have been kind of assigned for IDP issues: the government of Abkhazia in exile, then provisional administrative entity of South Ossetia. Okay, these are two different, of course, and then the Ministry of Refugees and Accommodation of Georgia. There were a lot of interference, a lot of overlap between them, and a lot of gaps which stayed not done by any of those entities. Very remarkable thing is that just 2 years ago, the Ministry of Refugees and Accommodation was abolished. And that really was a signal, and is a signal for me, that, you know, the IDP problems or issues are becoming lesser and lesser in the political agenda of Georgia. Not because they are living now better, or, okay, not because the displacement is not a problem, because, you know, a lot of time has passed. Many of them, they adapted themselves to the new situation, but many of them also died. This is passed away. This is also true. And the second generation now, which we see more and more active, do not have the same problems as the first generation of IDPs had. Sometimes you can't really tell about the second generation of IDPs, I mean the children of first generation IDPs, that they are IDPs at all, because they don't have any mental linkage or stigma or stress because of being IDPs. This is important. Yeah, okay. Now, couple of more slides. I think I'm mixing now up the messages which are in different slides, but I don't think that it matters very much for you, in order to be in time and really not to bore you too much. What is the state policy? State actions towards IDPs in Georgia have always been concentrated on so-called temporary integration. So not taking it very deep, and the reason was to keep motivation of return among IDPs. And that was really, okay, understandable, but very, very bad, I would say, very inefficient approach, because those people really suffered for a very, very long time, and were fed from the government by promises that they would very soon return to their homes. To use IDPs, the reason was, especially ones living in collective centers, as potential political support in elections, especially from the existing government side, because the IDPs were the most dependent people on government, right? Because they didn't have themselves, and they don't have anything by themselves. And that was a very, very good way to manipulate with them and to control them, especially for electoral, as electoral resource. And what are the consequences? Majority of IDPs found themselves in a limbo situation, and very unclear hopes and nostalgia are kept in IDPs, which deters the process and the wish to become a member of Georgian mainstream society. So they really, that generation, we can call it a lost generation under very, very big stress, and many of the first wave or the first generation IDPs, they really suffered a lot, and they just never found a good life in a new place. Now, some findings and some arguments. The residence of large number of IDPs in collective centers, twinned with a very high rate of unemployment, up to 50%, stimulates the deepening of social disintegration and creates a precondition for segregation. The Georgian government always tried to hinder the integration of IDPs in mainstream society. At least they didn't do anything to do the opposite, in order to keep their motivation of returning to the places of previous residence. They knew about miserable chances or no chances at all of achieving it, especially after the Russo-Georgian War of 2008. The growth of social distance rather than spatial distance is observed in Tbilisi, in other cities, and we have seen why. But important thing is what I already mentioned, that it is mostly for the first generation, while the second generation of IDPs, the existing generation, is more comfortable and better integrated. The special case was after the Russo-Georgian War, when the government, that time government of Saakashvili, organized new settlements for the refugees in close by areas, and I will show you the picture how these refugee camps or refugee new settlements, what they look like. And the new policy of renting housing of IDPs, and this is a fresh new since 4 or 5 years only, in new built residential districts and condominiums side by side with the regular dwellers, seems to be the optimal way of avoiding further disintegration and segregation. It is not a remedy, but it is much better way. And I will show now 2 slides. This is Tsarovani, close to Gori, a big IDP settlement, new settlement. Now it looks much more developed, let's say. However, it is like a concentration camp for me. It's so uniform and so isolated, and I don't think that, this was not the worst solution by that time, because they have got those private houses very, very fast, but at the same time, in the long term, it is not the most decent and good and efficient, let's say, decision. And now this is the Hualing Tbilisi Sea new city, which was built by Chinese investors for the Youth Olympic Festival in 2015. But the negotiation was that they gave for the very, very low prices 1,000 units to the government. The government bought them and accommodated free of charge 1,000 families of IDPs. And such kind of things happened also in some other new microrayons or new residential areas, Dirsi and so on, in quite decent locations, quite good locations. And the good thing is that here the facilities for everyone, commercial dwellers and IDPs, are the same. They are mixed up there. There could be some private contacts, of course, and private social networking, but in general, this is I think, a quite good way. However, bad thing is that so far not everyone is accommodated like this. I was here because one of my relatives got an apartment there, and the apartment is also nice, and the situation, I mean, the environment is really good, and the quality is also quite okay. So this is a new approach now, and we have to just hope that in 1 or 2 decades, this problem will diminish even more. However, we also have to, I also have to admit that, yeah, the existence of IDPs in Tbilisi and in other cities of Georgia put a very, very visible footprint on the, and had a quite big impact, not only on the places, on different places of the city or urban environment, but also on the social life of Georgian societies in corresponding cities. I think this is the last slide, yes, and if I may, I will take 2 more minutes. Olena, I want to make an announcement. So
yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, just very, very briefly. Yesterday was published already, came out a book about Georgia from autocracy to democracy, edited by Stephen Jones and Neil McFarlane. One is historian and another is historian from Mount Holyoke College in the US, and another, the Oxford University professor in international relations. And here is the content also, and also some geography is there, written by myself and my colleague Zurab Davitashvili, The Shifts in Georgian Geography. Now it will be available, and some also interesting topics, not about IDPs so much, but about political issues, relations. For example, for you, it would be interesting to read, I am sure, Russian Policy Towards Georgia, written by Neil McFarlane. So, okay, this is an advertisement, and now it will be available in Amazon, in some other places also. Okay. So by that, I say, yeah, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much for your lecture and also for your advertisement. Now we have time for a discussion, and I would like to give the word to Professor Mizantsev, who would be moderating our discussion today.
Thank you very much, dear Susur, for your lecture, for informative, fascinating lecture. And it's really important for us to understand such cases from Georgia. Internal displacement lasts longer than 10 years in Georgian cities. Our cities passed just half of this way.
Yes,
what are the main lessons that will be important or useful for Ukrainian cities in terms of coping with protracted displacement, or in terms of permanent temporariness, or segregation and concentration of poverty, and so on? Maybe some the main lessons.
Yeah, thank you. That's really very complicated question to answer. However, yeah, I have my perspective. I don't know how to do it, but I know what to do. First of all, a small remark about, comment about what you said. Yeah, actually, we have a practice now in Tbilisi and in other cities for more than 25 years. This everything started not from the 2008, but from the early 1990s. By the way, yesterday was 27th year when we kind of left Abkhazia, Sukhumi fell down. So it's a quite a long history, and this history and the time, of course, works. However, what I find very important is, first of all, the government should be honest with IDP population and not feed them with the illusions and promises that they will bring them back soon. Usually it doesn't happen. Usually it doesn't happen. Therefore, they have to acknowledge, the government and the society also, that those people, they need the same facilities and the same comfort and the same sources for life as all the others. This is very important thing. Otherwise, you get really getting a split society, which is not a good idea. Yeah, and that really embraces all those aspects which I already told you: education, healthcare, social security, social networking, political participation. And these are very important things. Then the rest is, you know, secondary. If the Haupt policy or the main policy is constructed, is designed in this way, I think that there could be more efficient actions towards solving several problems. And the second thing is that really, I'm absolutely sure it is quite, although it is quite expensive, I understand we are in the market society, the IDPs do not deserve, I say, with the wrong meaning of this word, negative meaning, to be put all of them together and in isolation, you know, both social and especially geographical, I mean, spatial isolation. They have to feel themselves a part of society, and they have to be assisted for getting such a feeling, which didn't happen, unfortunately, in Georgia. At least it didn't happen during many, many years. This is very brief because, well, if I know how to solve this problem, my dear friend, I would be a very famous man.
Thank you very much. And one more aspect, taking into account the topic of our doctoral school, life in geopolitical city. In Georgia case, in case of Tbilisi, we have visible signs of IDPs in the city with your great example of Hotel Iberia and huge camps. But at the same time, we could talk about invisible signs of IDPs when they prefer to be in shadow, not so loud. Is it true for case of Tbilisi? Yeah. Most of IDPs prefer to be out of discussions, out of...
Yes, unfortunately, it is completely true. And I want to emphasize again, especially among the first migrants, first generation IDPs, they are really, they didn't find many of them ability to integrate, and they are keeping themselves, they live different life, and all of a sudden they found themselves in a terrible situation, without social status, without economic sources, in different environment, without their private property and so on. And that really affected the most of the part of IDPs. What do you say? Okay, well, one thing is a kind of this visible practices, what they practice for their survival and coping with the situation from physical point of view. But of course, their presence sometimes is also felt in the society, especially in certain places where they usually are. These are markets, these are bazaars, these are some trading places or more popular places, not expensive places, cheap places, right? And sometimes in the public transport also. And, you know, that's very tricky to say, but I have a feeling also that sometimes I can really distinguish who from the elderly generation is migrant, is IDP. So they anyway, they put some yeah, many of them in different ways, but okay, some of the IDPs are living today much better and are integrated much better than myself. This also happens. Not everyone is the same, but if we're talking about the kind of plurality of IDPs, yes, they formed some distinct social group, which is vulnerable, was always vulnerable in our society.
Thanks, dear participants, dear colleagues. Please join our discussion. Michael, yeah, please.
So thank you very much for your talk. And I'd like you to develop the point that you were just discussing right now, which is about the need to be honest with IDPs and with your citizens in general from the government's perspective. That's a very interesting and very difficult point, because what does honest mean in particular contexts? For example, in 1994, 95, would the honest thing have been to tell the IDPs, you know, you're not going back? Or is this a gradual understanding of the situation, which I assume it is to some extent? But for example, today, what would then the recommendation be to Ukraine? There's a lot of people who have left the Donbass and Crimea. What should the message be? Should it be, well, those who come from the Donbass, you can count on coming back. Those who come from Crimea, you can count on coming back. Should it be differentiated? And above all, what messages does this give, not to the IDPs only, but to the rest of society? So this is very complicated, because the moment you give one message, you're also giving up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, okay, Misha, you know, now let me start from ironic, let's say, passage. You know, I don't think it's so popular in Ukraine now to ask Georgians about political decisions. I think they are fed up. But therefore, let me start from Georgian case. What I really mean is that, yes, there are evident things and obvious things, and there are processes and phenomena which we don't know from the very beginning. Therefore, you said absolutely correctly that you have really to develop it gradually, but on all stages, in all phases, you have to be sincere. Sincere before yourself and sincere before the people who suffers. And when feeding the people and telling that, okay, we now will bring you back, you will be able to get back in 1 year, 2 years, next New Year in Jerusalem or in Sukhumi. That's really slogans which do not work. They are very misleading. And when I think about that today, I think that they are very arrogant also, and very, very, very bad, very inadequate from politicians. Unfortunately, I have to admit that we don't have in Georgia, I don't know how it is in Ukraine, I just guess only, good politicians, sincere politicians, and far-looking politicians who are not just for tricking for a couple of years there. And this is a big problem. And that was even more true in the beginning of 1990, in the beginning of our independence. Although there was Shevardnadze, but he was not very clever in such cases, and he didn't have a good surrounding there. Then this rhetorics that, okay, we will do this and we will do that. That doesn't help. And we know now that it doesn't help. And just to somehow transfer this knowledge to Ukraine, it means that, yes, those people who left, they have to be ready for a long stay outside of their houses, outside of their places, for a very, very long even stay. And therefore, they need to be supported by the state, by the country, to get the basic facilities, basic sources for their livelihood. This is an expensive thing, I understand, but you know, well, you can't do otherwise. That really does not mean that, and this does not contain, I think, a message that you never get back, you never go back. On contrary, the government should try to bring them back as soon as it is possible, but not to, how to say, not really to deny from them or not to provide them the necessary first aid and the necessary aid for living for certain period of time which we don't know, because this will be a pending, let's say, process, right? Can anyone tell when the confrontation in Ukraine will be finished, will be over? How long it will take? We don't know. We don't know, and nobody knows. And nobody knows. Maybe some people have plans, but they don't know. They can't assure the trajectory of its development. Will be frozen completely, or it will go either one way or another way? We don't know, right? And if those people, 800,000 or maybe half of that, I don't know how many. I say the figures which I have just read, are just sitting and waiting when the government will bring them back. That doesn't make a good resolution of the situation. So there are things which government can't do, and we have to tolerate it and understand it, but there are other things which they can do and must do. Otherwise, yeah, no, otherwise why we need them? So this is my point. Now, I understand that what I say is easy to say, but is archaic, hyper difficult to do. However, well, what else could be done? Unfortunately, what I say, these are not conflicts which could be resolved forcefully. So these are very, very long negotiations and negotiating with some parties, which we know. I won't tell their name. It's like you know, killing yourself. That doesn't make any progress. But well, tough luck. This is the situation. Okay, sorry for being not very clear in my answer, but yeah, this is the way.
Yeah, thanks. More questions? Question from chat. What are the authorities' attitude towards the do-it-yourself modifications of the community centers? Are there any examples of originated action of IDP residents to
organized action of IDP residents to
transformations?
Yeah, okay, now that's a very, very good question, by the way. I can be very clear about it, that nowadays it is almost impossible to perform do-it-yourself activities, because that was a period. I even have a periodization of urban development of Tbilisi after the independence, and the first period was do-it-yourself urbanism. Why? Because the government was very, very weak and very corrupt, because there was no money in the country as such. They were only removed Soviet regulations, but not replaced by new laws and so on. And this system did not work. There was a big disorder, and therefore everyone could do whatever they wanted, including IDPs. As I said, now the number of collective centers is reducing also. I don't know the exact number because I didn't follow up this process for many years now. But definitely I can even notice, even see visually that in some places where before was a kind of collective center is an empty building, I mean demolished or devastated building, but it is empty. So this thing happens, of course, and today these do-it-yourself practices are not so much practiced and are not practiced at all, I would say, neither among regular population nor among IDP population. Before, the attitude was negative. However, they were not a strong, at least I didn't remember, a strong, let's say, measures to prevent it. That was sort of accepted practice. But that period stopped, finished, in my understanding, around some 2005, 2006. So it's many years now that we can't change the environment and building so easily in Tbilisi. Yeah, this is my answer, if it is satisfying.
Thank you very much. And more question? Maybe I will continue our discussion with such aspect. When we talk about Ukrainian IDPs, mostly they are the same as hosting societies, the same ethnically, but with some difference in terms of values, in terms of everyday behavior patterns and so on. And sometimes we discuss about some clashing between newcomers and locals. You give some examples on rural-urban relations between different group of IDPs and locals, because most of IDP or part of IDP are rural in origin and they try to maintain their practices. But in general, outside of ethnic questions, what are the main aspects of tension between IDPs and locals?
You know, mentality and culture. Because even you noticed very correctly that even they are Georgians by nationality doesn't mean that they are the same or very similar, because there are a lot of differences in mentality, in culture, in behavior, in values between different parts of Georgia, and here we have from time to time clash. But and I can't really now list all those differences. However, for me, it is really very obvious that the people, not only IDPs, but also regular migrants coming to Tbilisi, they are behaving in the city differently. If they are coming from rural places or small towns, right? So they are bearing their kind of behavior and traits, and that's normal. And it needs really time to adapt to the new situation. Some of them may do it faster, some of them slowly, or don't do it at all. However, those differences are visible, and sometimes those differences could be, and happen to be, a reason for confrontation. At least verbal confrontation, because Tbilisians, let's say, we are very arrogant Tbilisians, as if my 100 generations before they lived in Tbilisi. For example, my father was born in Batumi, and he came to Tbilisi when he was a student. And my mother is Tbilisian, but okay, it doesn't matter. I'm Tbilisian, and the people people like me, they can say, okay, this kind of migrants, they are so nasty, and they bring, they don't have culture, and they misbehave and so on. Unfortunately, this also exists, and yeah, there are some division lines, and here belonging to the place is also one of such line. Could be. There are, I see, Kostya, several questions in chat.
Yeah,
Maybe
question from Michael.
Okay.
Chat.
Michael, okay, Michael, I'm ignoring Michael.
Should I repeat it? The question that I wanted to pose regards the actually quite concretely the Tbilisi Sea development,
Yeah.
where a share of the apartments is basically given to IDPs for a very low price. This very much reminds me of policies in many Western European cities, whereby a share of apartments built in, for example, London or Oslo or other places have to be reserved for social housing, or, for example, in the Oslo case, also student housing.
Yes.
And that can, I mean, the goal of that is, of course, to solve a concrete problem, but it can also create tensions in the population. So what does the public think about this? And are there tensions between IDPs and non-IDPs who feel that they should have the right to access?
Yeah, very good question, Michael. I'm studying it at the moment because I have a small project financed by Chinese Academy of Sciences and Geography Institute of Geography. Yeah, and they are interested about Chinese investments in Georgia. And one of such investment is this Hualing Tbilisi Sea New City. And at the moment, I'm making kind of interviewing of the local people, several number of IDPs and non-IDPs. However, what I have heard so far, there are no tensions at all.
Mm.
On the other hand, I don't know how closely IDP population and non-IDP population are interrelated and interacting together, maybe. But now, you know, in the new residential micro-rayons or such kind of places, there is a minimal, only very limited contacts between the neighbors. And if they don't know even each other, that won't be very strange, unless there is a big number, big clusters of unemployed people. Then they would meet each other more often. So I don't know, but my first, sorry, I will finish. My first impression is that there are no tensions at all. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, one continuation about that. Is it so that the apartments that are reserved or earmarked for IDPs are somehow less attractive than the remainder? For example, lower floors, smaller, or are they exactly the same, and are they randomly distributed?
Not really, but not all the buildings are the same there. Okay, if the building is the same, then the conditions are the same also. No, there is no difference between floors. However, for example, the most of IDPs have been given there in this Hualing. I don't know in some other places, but in Hualing, in those buildings which have been used as dormitories for the sportsmen. So the first, let's say, generation of buildings, at least the most of them. Now I will also get the more comprehensive, more complete idea about it after finishing the interviews and study. However, not really. Yeah, the conditions are more or less the same. So it is not like someone gets much better in the same building. But then the second, let's say, wave of the buildings look a little bit better than first. So it could be that there the apartments are better. However, they could be also quite much more expensive. And the refugee, IDPs, they get it free of charge completely, free of charge. The state bought those buildings for them, and they paid according to the contract with the developer for much less price, maybe 1/3 of the commercial price of the building.
So they rent the apartments?
No, this is very important. In Georgia, this rented social housing, which means rental housing, doesn't work. All these apartments are given in the private property.
Okay, thanks. And we have 3 more questions in the chat from Valeria and from Vladislav. Do you see the homeward return of IDPs to their places of origin as a possibility? As far as my experience of interviewing the IDPs in Ukraine shows, the younger generation of people do not see it as an opportunity. Those people who are already experienced their life in a city might not be very keen on coming back to a rural area or a small town.
That's a very good question. Very good question, Valeria, because I also have thought about it and I have talked about it with some of IDP second generation, my students and so on. And you're right, the feeling is and sentiments are very different between the first generation IDPs and their then second generation younger people. Yeah, many of them definitely they won't be even interested to go back, but it also matters from where they were. Yeah, many of them, at least if there was a possibility, they would return just to restore their estate, their house, and the courtyard and use it as a summer residence and so on. However, I have to admit that today it is absolutely impossible because being Georgian means that you are not allowed to go to these places. There is an apartheid actually very, very clear in Abkhazia and South Ossetia.
Thanks. And one more question devoted to rather urban planning, where there are some international urban design planning initiatives, for example, within technical cooperation projects aimed at developing special guidelines for IDP settlements in Georgia.
No. IDP, as I said, IDP topic becomes less and less relevant to the agenda, political agenda of Georgia. What is done, it is done. Now, many of them, they are already mixed among the mainstream population. And what remains is not a kind of, is not tackled by the government so much. So, okay, they know that, and they promised, and most probably they will do in what time stretch, I don't know, but they will eventually provide with housing all families. And this is a kind of aim. But to think about, for example, the same Tsarovani or these new settlements or some larger districts, no, I didn't hear about it. I don't know. At least at the moment, it is not a priority.
Thanks. And one more question from me, gender question. It's also important in terms of IDPs. Some studies on IDPs in Georgia devoted to so-called phenomenon as traumatic masculinity. when some male IDPs, when displaced to new environment, to new urban environment, lose their feeling as a head of the family, losing the house, jobs, incomes, and so on. And as a result, female IDPs are more active. Is it true for Tbilisi case?
Absolutely. Absolutely, all over the space. I didn't know this term, traumatic masculinity. I didn't know about it. But it is exactly like this, and I tried to mention it with other words, but yes, who suffers the most are men out of this first generation, IDPs. And the women are more, showed themselves more adaptive to the situation and more active. So it is very similar in Georgia.
Thanks. And from chat question, how do internally displaced persons with a pastoral identity change the urban identity of residents in local communities? What is formed as a result of the overlapping of these identities? Questions?
Yeah, okay. In general, yeah, I understand what it is about. And in general, as I said, yeah, you could see those smaller examples. Of course, they, the power behind or in those IDPs is very, very limited. They can't change many things. Okay, they can change their identity, but it also goes very slowly. It is not so easy to change. But their impact on the environment was minimal, was very local. Small scale. However, you could notice it even in the high-rise apartment block microrayons, residential areas. They tried to do some agriculture, gardening, and so on and so on and so on. However, I won't say that it has impacted very, very much the all over area of the city. Yeah. Do you know what is
thanks. Follow-up questions to Michael's questions about social housing.
Just one thing.
Do you know what is the procedure?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Here is about social housing. Unfortunately, social housing is also very limited in Georgia. Actually, the collective center is a social housing of a very inadequate style. But another kind of not social housing, but not a rental, but in a private property is what I say when the government grants the property to IDPs. We have only few cases of social housing programs, and they didn't work well because the people who acquired apartments in social houses then refused to move out after 10 years. This pattern didn't work in Georgia quite well, at least so far. So therefore, I can't answer anything more about it because the procedures of allocating, they just doesn't exist because there are no house. If we're talking about providing free apartments to IDPs, what is the procedure? I really can't tell it now. I don't know how the ministry decides. There is a Ministry of Refugees and Social Affairs and so on, the new ministry, because the former one was abolished. How they decide about it, I have no idea. Sorry.
Maybe the last question, who are volunteers to finalize. Okay. I think this question will be open for all of us. What are the main future for IDPs?
They want, yeah. They should give the participants my email if someone is interested.
Thank you very much. We will share your email. Thank you very much, dear dear Professor Salukvadze, for your lecture, for your discussion, for explaining different aspects of IDPs' life in a geopolitical city. Tbilisi is a true geopolitical city, as well Ukrainians ones, and we will be happy if you will join to other our events. And for all participants, thank you very much for discussion, for participation. And now we have time for relax, for a cup of coffee or tea, and then we are waiting for you at 5 p.m. Central European time.
Thank you, and the audience. Thank you very much for inviting, and it was a pleasure for me to share my ideas with you. So have a very, very fruitful and nice summer school.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more time, thank you very much for your lecture, for this discussion. A lot of important lessons could be learned for the case of Ukraine. And we would continue at 5 p.m. So we invite all of you to join us at 5 p.m. So see you.
Central European time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So
thank you very much. And see
Thanks,
you.
and goodbye. See you someday soon.
See you.
See you.
In Kiev or in Tbilisi.
Sure.
Okay, guys. Bye-bye.